Have you ever been so scared that you wanted to die? Like legit close your eyes and never wake up again so you wouldn't have to face the horror of your reality. I'm 14 and that's how I felt. No, it's how I feel. And I don't think I will ever feel normal again. And no, before you ask, I'm not suicidal. As a matter of fact, I'm far from being crazy, and I think that is my biggest problem. My name is Eric, and it happened like this. Picture me, a short, skinny black kid with dreads, braces, and yeah, glasses. Not that any of that stuff was bad, but you're not really making cool friends if you think you look like a geek. So when I moved to my new neighborhood, the Pink Streets, a rich part of my city where the streets were literally paved with pink slabs of concrete, I was really freaking happy when those 5 kids walked up into my yard when I was raking leaves. At first, I thought they were the neighborhood douche committee because they pretty much looked the part. All wearing nice clothes, had the look of their faces that just said, "I'm superior to you." You know the type, the kids who ran their school. And as luck would have it, I was about to start school tomorrow. So when their leader walked right up to me, I was kind of worried but hopeful. I should have just ran back inside. He was a tall kid, about my age. He had the classic blonde hair and blue eyes. Kind of reminded me of the kid from Home Alone. "What's up?" he says to me with a smile. I nodded my head up at him in the coolest way that I knew how. "Hey," I said back. "Look, you're obviously new to the neighborhood," Blondie said, "so let me help you out. You're going to want to hang out with us." And he nodded back to his friends who were waiting for him on the street. I didn't know what to say or what face to make, so I just looked from him to his friends and then back at him. "I am?" I said. "Yep," he replied. "If you don't, we're just going to make fun of you and pretty much make you hate this place." "Oh," I said, looking down. I knew the response that I should have made was to tell him to fuck off, but I never really had friends unless you counted my gaming clan. Yeah, I know. Sad. "Right, well," said the blonde kid, "before you are accepted into our group, you have to do something first." "What's that?" I asked. "You have to play a game with us, and if you do good, you're in. If you suck, then we make life hell for you. So are you in?" He held out his hand for me to shake it. I looked down at that hand, and then at him, and then at his friends, and I recalled one of my favorite movies, The Sandlot. And I'm such a loser that this kid instantly became my Benny the Jet Rodriguez. I know, I should not have done it. Believe me, I know. But I did what any nerd in my position would do. I took his hand. "Alright," said the boy shaking my hand. "My name is Benjamin." And as soon as he said it, my head jerked back on its own at the weird coincidence. He noticed and gave me a squinty-eyed look, but continued. "Come meet the rest of the guys." Okay, so in all, there was the tall and slender Mike Gilbert, the chubby kid they called Fish, a very pretty mixed girl named Melody, and then a dark-haired kid named Billy who, out of them all, seemed none too thrilled about meeting me because when I tried to shake his hand, he pushed me and spit on my shoes. "Ah, don't mind Billy," Benjamin said. "He's like that to everyone until he gets to know them. And we're gonna do that tonight." I was standing in the middle of them now, in the street in front of my house. "Tonight?" I said. "Yeah, for the game," Chubby Fish said quickly. He looked like he wanted to say more, but Benjamin quickly cut him off with just a look. I was reminded of a dog on a tight leash. Something was weird about this already. "The game," I said. "What game, like Call of Duty?" They all laughed, except for Billy. "No," Benjamin answered with a wry grin. "We don't play those types of games." "Then what are we going to play?" I asked. "We play something called Michael Myers." I gave him the blankest look I could muster. "Come again?" "It's kind of like hide and seek," he said, "only when you find someone, that person has to play dead in the spot that you killed him until the game is over, and if you move, you're out. Like, out. Out of the game and out of our group." I scratched my head. "But what if you're found first? Wouldn't you..." Benjamin chuckled. "Have to stay dead for a long time?" "Yeah, that's the point. Games last for an hour, so bring a watch or your phone because we set a timer." I nodded. That made a little more sense. "Okay, so where are we playing?" I asked. "At the murder house," Benjamin said. I blinked. "Come again?" "Scared already?" Billy spit at me like venom. I told you this kid was a fuckboy. Let's just go, Ben. He ain't got what we need. Another sharp look from Benjamin made Billy instantly shut up. It's called Murder House, Benjamin said, looking at me, because it has its own graveyard in the back of the place. It should be pretty easy to find. Just take Classic Street all the way back to the creek. You can see it from there. Meet us at the front at 9 o'clock. 9? I said, but I have to be in at 8. Meet us there at 9, Benjamin repeated, or else. And with that, he turned to leave, and the rest followed. And trust me, it was very eerie the way they did it, like robots or something. Altogether, I knew there was something strange going on, but as much as I watched movies and TV and played video games, I knew all that stuff was fake. Which is why playing some stupid hide-and-seek game in Murder House or whatever wasn't about to scare me. A few hours later, I was tasked with the problem of how to get out of the house past curfew. I thought of the easiest method. I would just leave the house at 7 and simply not come home. I would have to have my phone, so I planned to tell my parents if they called that it ran out of power and I lost track of time. Easy peasy. So, at 8:30, I found my way down Classic Street until I ran into the creek. And sure enough, I saw Murder House on the other side. I found the creek bridge easy enough, and by the looks of it, the grass here was not being taken care of because it was all overgrown. Bushes came up to my waist, and more than a few times did my foot get caught on vines that didn't want to let me go without a fight. And as for the Murder House, this place looked very creepy in the fading light of the day. It was 2 stories and painted a faded sky blue type of color. There was a deck on the second floor in the front where I could see 2 doors made of dilapidated wood frames and broken glass, as if kids, probably Benjamin and his friends, had thrown rocks. There were 3 giant oak trees bracketing the house, each under attack by massive plagues of moss. The sound of crickets and cicadas rang through the air like a chorus. As I crossed the creek bridge and approached the front of the house, I saw the skeletal remains of an old pickup truck on 4 flat tires sleeping next to a sagging wooden shed, both of which resided under one of the huge oak trees. From one of the lower branches, a tire swing hung motionless on rusted chains. The front doors to the place were like the ones up on the second floor balcony, wooden frames and shattered glass, only these doors were boarded up with flat planks that were decorated with lurid spray paintings of obscene words. There was a stench in the air, like a dead animal that had been dead a few days. I traveled around the right side of the house where I saw another shed. This one newer, white, but it was rusted, and it had a broken lock on its door. There was a side door to the house, just a normal one this time, and it too was boarded up. Around the back of the house I saw another rusted car, an old yellow Volkswagen Beetle, and beyond that there was an iron fence with a gate through which I could see the graveyard. The grass here was just as out of control. It reminded me of Jurassic Park. Try to imagine a yard of plants, grass, and weeds that had not been cut for like a century, and you might get a good idea of what I was seeing. In the distance, somewhere beyond the graveyard, I heard a dog barking, and I could have swore it was barking at me, though I couldn't see any animal. It was getting too dark. "You're early!" I screamed and jumped straight up in the air. Benjamin laughed as I turned around, and he patted my shoulder. "Scared much?" he said. I was about to laugh too until I got a good look at him. He was wearing all black, and it looked like someone had clawed a hand of black paint across his face. He saw my look and waved his hands to the sides to give me a better look at him, even twirling around. "All black helps you not to get caught," he said. "So I'm guessing you're not it, then?" He shook his head. "Then who is? Let me guess. Me?" He laughed. "No way, you're not cool enough for that yet. You're hiding with the rest of us. Billy is it." "Billy. Great," I thought. "Where is he? Where are the others?" "Inside. Come on." And he waved me to follow after him. "Inside? Won't we get in trouble?" I said. "By who?" "The people who owned this place all died a long time ago, and no one wants to buy it, so it's basically our new playground." "Pretty creepy playground," I remarked. "The best." He countered me and led me to the back door of the place, where I accidentally stepped on the head of a girl's baby doll. The back door opened when Benjamin turned the knob, and he let me in first. The room I found myself in looked to be like a laundry room, though the places where the washer and dryer would sit were empty. I could still see the marks on the floor where they once stood, though. In the next room was where the others were gathered around an electric lantern at a table. Everyone was here except for Billy, and everyone was dressed similarly in all black. Fish was playing with some action figure, or rather breaking its limbs. Melody was sitting in a chair with her arms folded, giving me a peculiar look, as if trying to decide if I tasted good. Mike Gilbert was pulling on fingerless gloves. "Where's Billy?" I asked the room. Benjamin answered me with a nod towards a doorway leading further into the interior of the house, maybe a dining room. I strained my eyes to see until Billy came out. He too was wearing all black, but he was wearing a hockey mask with 3 jagged lines of red blood-colored paint running in a diagonal line from one corner to the lower one. He pulled the mask up and grinned at me. "Let's get started," Billy said, almost like a command. Benjamin just gave him a look, then pulled one of his sleeves up to reveal the cheap pink and black wristwatch. "Yeah, it's about that time. Okay, so rules." Benjamin looked directly at me now. "If you get killed..." At this, Billy pulled a rusty knife from somewhere behind him. "You have to stay on the ground where you got stabbed." "Wait, what?" I said. "Stabbed," Billy said happily, making stabbing motion towards me with his knife. "Relax," Benjamin said. "He's not going to literally stab you. Billy, stop trying to scare him." Billy frowned and put the knife down on the table next to Fish's action figure parts. "No, back where you got it," Benjamin snapped at him. Billy sighed and picked back up the knife and disappeared back into the house where he had come from. "Okay, so Billy is going to tag you," Benjamin said, "and when he does, you have to stay still until he catches everyone or an hour has passed from when we started. You must stay on the property. No crossing the creek, no going over or past the fence lines. The graveyard is fair, but beyond it is out of bounds. If you give up and leave, you're out, and we will make life hell for me," I finished for him. "Yeah, I got it." "Good," he said. "Let's go. Oh yeah, almost forgot. The house is fair too." And he went out the back door. The others followed. I followed them to the front of the house where all light had faded and it was dark except for the moon and stars. There were street lamps, but they were a ways away, back on the street. Out of bounds. By the time we all gathered next to the skeletal truck, Billy appeared from around the other side of the house, sliding his bloody hockey mask back on. "Okay, Billy is going to count to 50 and then come for us, so we have to hide, quick." I stared at Billy. "Stop staring at me, queer," he snapped back at me. "I don't have the knife." And he raised both hands, spun around and lifted his shirt a bit to show me that he didn't have it tucked in his pants. I sighed with relief and Melody giggled. 1, 2, 3. Billy began counting, and at the sound, Mike, Melody, and Fish bolted in different directions. Benjamin grabbed me by the wrist, laughing, and pulled me with him. "Come on, let's go!" Childish excitement welled up in my chest, and I felt guilty. Guilty for feeling so giddy over a glorified game of hide-and-seek, and guilty because I knew these were the friends I should not have, but wanted anyway. Benjamin let go of me after I started running with him, and he led me to the back of the house and beyond towards the graveyard. The gate was silent when he pushed it open and closed just as quietly. There were several gravestones erected in varying spots in the unkempt grassy weeds, and Benjamin ran straight past them all to what could only be described as a crypt, a mausoleum. I hoped to God that Benjamin wouldn't go inside, and to my relief he didn't, but he did go behind it and jumped down into a hole. He motioned me in after him. "Come on," he said. "I dug it earlier. Billy will never find us here." I paused, but said, "What the hell," and jumped in. It was very deep and wide. A lot of work, I thought, for just a hiding spot. Inside of the hole there was a wooden slab. Benjamin motioned for me to help him put it up over our heads. "This always sits here like this," Benjamin explained, "so Billy has no reason to look under it." It made sense, sort of, I thought. The wooden board closing over us like a coffin lid put us in pitch blackness. I pulled out my phone and activated the light. "We'll wait here for a bit and then head into the house," said Benjamin. I shook my head. "Why?" "Oh," he said, "I forgot to tell you. There's a spot in the house that's the safe zone. We can't get tagged there." I nodded. That was good. I didn't want to stay there all night. In a hole. In a graveyard. At Benjamin's command, I put my phone away, and I swore something was crawling up my pants, but I ignored it. After about 10 minutes went by of us just sitting in the dark in silence, Benjamin pulled the board aside and peeked his head out. "I think I hear him chasing Melody," he whispered. I strained my ears to listen. I heard bugs. He pulled the board all the way back and hopped out. I followed. I tried to listen hard, and I thought I could faintly hear a girl screaming. "Sounds like he got her," Benjamin muttered. He held out his hand and helped me out of the hole he had dug for us. Then we ran for the house. We got to the back door without any incident and went inside. The electric lamp was still glowing on the table. I went for the chair that Fish had been sitting in, and Benjamin shook his head. "We aren't safe here." As I heard those words, I could have sworn it sounded like he was talking about something other than this game. He picked up the lamp and jerked his head for me to follow after him. We walked through the house to the dining room, then an old wooden table and... We walked through the house to the dining room that held an old wooden table and broken chairs. Rats scurried across the floor, and on one wall next to a slashed painting, I saw a gigantic spider crawl into the darkness of the ceiling. We aren't safe here, I thought. Benjamin led me to a small door off of the dining room and opened it up. It revealed a staircase leading to a lower room, a basement, which struck me as odd because no house in Florida had a basement. It was a state law or something. At the landing of the stairs, we appeared to be in a type of workshop. There was a bench with rusted chips, blocks of wood, and cans and bottles. Shelves lined the walls. Most of them were empty except for one. It held a few objects that were strangely arrayed in a neat row. One of the objects I noticed right away was the knife that Billy had been holding. I walked towards it and went to pick it up, but Benjamin stopped me with his voice. "Each of these things are said to have a story behind them. It's why we keep them here like this. They are supposed to be artifacts of murder." He chuckled as if he thought it was a silly myth. Aside from the knife, there was a skull that didn't look human, a broken Rubik's Cube puzzle, a statue of a garden gnome that reminded me of Killer Keemstar, and a figurine of a gargoyle. "What are the stories?" I asked. "Pick one, and I'll tell you," Benjamin said. I gave him a cocked eyebrow and shrugged. He looked at me eagerly as I reached for the shelf, as if anxious to see which one I'd pick. Weird-ass kid, I thought. The skull that most definitely wasn't human seemed like the easiest choice, so I grabbed it and presented it to him. "What's the story behind this?" I asked. Benjamin looked down, and his eyes misted over as if he were trying to recall something. "That's Lucky," he said. Lucky was this dog that belonged to the people who owned the murder house about 50 years ago. He was that family's guard dog. It was said that once he broke free of his leash and killed someone who was trespassing. He was supposed to be put down because of it. I heard that instead of letting the city do it, the family did it themselves, only that they didn't. I smiled. "And let me guess. Some mystical, ancient curse lets the family dog come back to life once a year to protect the house?" I laughed. Benjamin chuckled, but it was heartless. I put the skull back down, then picked up the knife. "What about this? Serial killer?" Benjamin nodded. "It's why they call this place the murder house. The last family to own the house had this crazy Uncle Michael who stayed with the family. He went crazy one night for some unknown reason and killed everyone, and then himself. And let me guess, his last name just happened to be Myers." I shook my head. "No," Benjamin said, "their last names were Newman. They're all buried in the family graveyard. You want to go see?" I hesitated. "But what about the safe zone?" "It'll be alright," Benjamin said. "We just have to dodge Michael." "You mean Billy?" Yeah, you know what I mean." Uh-huh. I made to put the knife down, but right at the sound I heard a loud crash, and I swore the entire house shook. Then there was this guttural sound like a groan. It reminded me of a wounded animal, but I couldn't think of any animal that made a sound like that except something big and something that was dying. It was all around us. I looked at Benjamin and his eyes had gone very wide, and he put a finger to his lips and pointed up. It had to be up because there was nowhere else for it to be. He put his fingers to his lips and turned the light off. I held onto the knife. I felt his hand grab my arm and he pulled me up the stairs. My heart was beating very fast now. I did not want to go upstairs, but I let Benjamin pull me and didn't see what choice I had. As we reached the top landing, the sound of the groaning animal became louder and more clear. Through one of the distant windows, I could see glimmers of red, like a misty light. Even though rational thought was telling me this was not real, I knew in my mind what was going on. Something was coming, something that wasn't alive. The house was so dark now that I couldn't see 3 steps in front of me. The red light was dimming until it was eventually gone. I whispered Benjamin's name, but he didn't answer. Again, louder, and he let go of my wrist. I wished he would turn on his lamp, and it was then that I remembered that I had a phone with a light, so I pulled it out and turned it on. It illuminated the area around me, and I found to my shock that I was utterly alone. I looked all around me for Benjamin, but he was just gone. I was by myself in the dining room. I whispered his name again and got no response. Said it out loud and still nothing. My brain was working overtime. What was going on? What was rational? What was reasonable? A joke. That was it. This was a joke. They were playing a joke on the new kid. That had to be it, because certainly there was no such thing as ghosts or monsters or zombie dogs. Ha ha, I called out to the house. Okay, you guys got me. Very funny. I'm going home now. I pointed my phone light towards the back door and took a step. Pause. I looked around. What was that smell? Like electricity. Shaking my head to dismiss this nonsense, I took another step. I stopped and looked all around. That was a dog. And an angry one. Or was it? Was it them messing with me? Douchebag committee. I went straight for the door. Okay, you bunch of assholes. I get it. You wanted to... I twisted the knob and flung the door open and froze. My throat closed and I couldn't even breathe. I couldn't move, for standing in front of me was what could only be described as a monstrous mass of black fur, mist, and 2 glowing red points. And teeth. Gigantic teeth. It was a gigantic wolf monster. It opened its mouth wide and snapped at me, showing rows of razor-sharp fangs with incisors as big as my fingers. It took a slow step towards me, and finally my paralysis broke and I took a step back. And then another, until finally I said fuck this shit and turned and ran back the way I had come. For whatever reason, my mind raced with the thought of safe zone. I headed full tilt to the door off of the dining room, fully cognizant of the beastly creature tearing through the house after me, throwing table and chairs out of its way to get at me. I hit the door and ran down the steps as fast as I could and looked back to see the giant wolf beast paused at the top of the stairs. I was safe. I took a deep breath and swallowed, and then something truly unthinkable happened. The monster leapt down the stairs after me. It lunged right for my chest, and I screamed, raising my knife-wielding hands to cover my face, and then I was on my back and felt hot acid burning through my shirt and frying my face. A heavy weight pressed down upon my chest, pinning me to the ground. I felt the fur, smelt the rancid breath, and even though my eyes were closed, I knew what I was going to see when I opened them. But I was wrong. It was Benjamin. He was laying on top of me, lifeless. I screamed and pushed him off. What the fuck? I quickly sat up and looked for the wild beast monster dog thing, but it was nowhere to be found. I turned towards Benjamin and shook him, but he was as dead as a doornail. Inspecting him, I saw that his throat was ripped apart, and as well he had a gaping, bleeding hole in his abdomen. Holy jeez, I said under my breath. It was time to get the actual fuck out of Dodge. I stood up and booked up the stairs and ran right into Benjamin. I did a double take and looked down the stairs to the Benjamin that I had just left, but my phone light didn't reach that far, so I turned back to the one in front of me, and he was smiling. "Thank you," he said, and then to my utter horror and surprise, he vaporized. I was stunned. A second later, I was aware of someone behind me, breathing very hard. I turned and immediately saw a giant of a man, and in his hand he held a familiar kitchen knife. The one he used to stab me right through the chest. Which brings us to now. Would you like to play a game called Michael Myers?